Welcome in this week, Tiger fans, to another episode of Bayou Bengal Bites. Another good weekend, Tyler. I'm feeling better and better each week we do these things, right? We're not depressed come Monday morning. So LSU got it done. Tyler, what you see from our Tigers that reign supreme over all other Tigers in the SEC?
Yeah, 2-0 in the back-to-back Tiger meetings, and I think that this was definitely the most complete game that I saw on both sides of the ball. If you're a betting man and you bet for LSU to cover, they'd win you some money this weekend.
Yep, they've been covering back-to-back weeks. Defense has been showing out, stepping up. So they're doing what they got to do to keep themselves relevant, right? So let's get into it this week. Hit that subscribe button, comment what you thought about the Auburn game, what to take away. I know Auburn was a pretty bad offense, but hey, it is what it is. We'll take the victories where we can. So let's get into it. Okay, so final score Death Valley on Saturday night of 48-18, with LSU proving better and what potentially could be one of the last matchups we see against Auburn over the next couple of years with the new SEC schedule realignment. So started off hot. LSU went right down the field on its first drive, 4 plays, touchdown. I don't remember who scored that first touchdown,
Lake
but
neighbors.
Malik. Oh, well, I mean, you could have just thrown that name out anywhere. He was all over the place. He had a big night. Brian Thomas had a little bit of a slow night, but Kyron Lacey came up as LSU's proven wide receiver number 3. He had that big drop early. He told BK, "Hey, I'm gonna get you back one." BK says, "No, you got to get me back two," and that's what he did. 4 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. He's shifty after the catch, man. I mean, they couldn't tackle him, so it was it was more the battle, right? LSU's top offense against a pretty decent Auburn defense. Where on the other side of the ball you had a dead last Auburn offense and maybe not dead last, but pretty close to last LSU defense. And the LSU Tigers, proved their worth and seem to have built off of this hiring of Pete Jenkins, the second half of Missouri game. That momentum, they're just keeping it rolling, and we have Army next week. But Tyler, in a game that was very dominated by the offense, it was more like let's just see how many points we can score. Auburn had it 10-point deficit at the half, but that was the closest it'll ever be. So what you see from LSU?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of positives to take from this. Once again, like you mentioned, this was a close game. It was 20-10 going into the third quarter, and then all of a sudden, LSU's offense just exploded. Like you mentioned, Kyron Lacey had a big game, and then Malik Neighbors really started off with that touchdown. So I mean, it could be Brian Thomas, it can be Malik Neighbors, it can be Kyron Lacey. Like you have three star-studded wide receivers, and then Logan Diggs just continues to be a
Yep.
baller. Jane Daniels is right up there in the Heisman discussion. Michael Penix is probably the favorite, but if I had to put a number 2 guy, it would be Jane Daniels. I mean, Daniels is just playing with his hair on fire right now. I mean, he is just cool, calm, collected as a pocket passer, and whenever he has an open hole, he takes off and run. And we saw him slide for once, which is
I
definitely
know.
good to see. I was like, man, I saw him slide on that one big play. I was like, thank the Lord, because in Missouri, he got banged up, had that rib injury, and then 2 weeks ago against Ole Miss, he was able. Ole Miss's defense really got after him. So this was definitely a bright spot to see. You got a little bit of spark in the kickoff return with Caleb Jackson. Caleb
Yep.
Jackson. This reminds me so much of Leonard Fournette, especially with the big
He caught
hits
a
that he laid.
body, man. I mean,
On
absolutely the
on
murder on the
Asante.
field.
But we all know what this offense is capable of. Really nobody is able to stop them outside of the Florida State defense. Florida State's defense is one of the best in the country, so that's not really nothing to be ashamed of. But on the defensive side, Harold Perkins, he really was all over the field. He had a couple of sacks on whenever Robbie Ashford went into Zy Alexander. He had a very good game. He had a lot of pass breakups. He was leading tackler for LSU. And then in the field goal department, Damian Ramos was perfect once again. So I think that all assets that you're looking for, if you would have told me that this would be a 30-point margin, I probably would have called you crazy, because in past history, it's been a very close margin. The last time that this defeat came in 2020, whenever TJ Finley was the starting quarterback for LSU. Auburn won that game like 48-11. That was the
The
worst
Bo Nix
margin
game.
defeat. So a couple of years ago. And so I think that, all in all, like I mentioned, this was definitely the most complete game of the season. Some could say that it was Mississippi State, but man, Auburn's offense, they're two quarterback system isn't quite working out for them. Hugh Freeze doesn't really have a grasp of this offense, but outside of that, especially with the way that the LSU defense was looking early on, it looked like it's in the step in the right direction. Like I mentioned, you're not going to see any other quarterbacks that you've already seen. Jordan Travis is one of the best in the country. Jackson Dart. If you look at the rest of the schedule, you got Army, Alabama, Jalen Milrow. Milrow has had his ups and downs. Florida, Graham Mertz. He threw for over 400 passing yards against South Carolina, but and then you also have Max Johnson, then Georgia State's quarterback. This defense has already went through the gauntlet of quarterbacks. So definitely, a lot of positives to take from a blowout in Death Valley, which was definitely refreshing. We needed a break from all these stressful games.
Oh, I know. That's you texted me after the game and said, "Wow, a game that was probably over by halfway through the third quarter, and we could just relax." It would have been. I mean, we mentioned 10-point deficit at half for Auburn. It would have been a lot higher. LSU had a little more penalties than they typically have. Brian Kelly wasn't too thrilled about that, but in a game where the honestly Tiger Stadium just took over. I mean, on the opening drive for Auburn, you saw I think two false starts, an early snap past the quarterback. They just weren't ready for this hostile and ruckus environment, and sold out crowd. It was the vibes were in the air. Everybody was rocking and rolling and ready for a good LSU Tiger win. You mentioned the two quarterback system from Auburn. I honestly would have thought they would have relied on Robbie more after he just absolutely diced up LSU last year. I mean, the man threw for like 350 yards, had a couple
Mm-hmm.
touchdowns. But then this year, it just that wasn't the case. They went with Auburn's quarterback in Peyton Thorne. That was their guy. They were sticking with him, and he couldn't do anything. In all honesty, Auburn looked better with Ashford on the field. So we're not Auburn fans. We won't tell you how to run your football team, but from my eyes, I would have kept him out there. So let's get to some key takeaways here, Tyler. All right, so some key takeaways I want to talk about, kind of on the defensive side. That was we knew LSU's offense was going to come off the bus scoring 35 points, right? I mean, that's a given on any night, maybe except for Florida State. But the defensive standpoint was how LSU slowed down Auburn's rushing attack. Auburn was averaging over 200 rushing yards a game. They had 220 rushing yards against number one ranked Georgia. LSU only held them to 139 rushing yards. So Pete Jenkins, give that man whatever he wants. Give him a raise, give him an office, give him a permanent position. I don't care what you got to do, Brian Kelly. Don't let him leave Baton Rouge. Don't let him leave LSU's campus. And the defensive line, Tyler, looked great. They were getting off their blocks. They had a couple sacks. I mean, you had Harold Perkins just whatever position they figured out for him out there and like covering the slot and the quarterback, he's like out of his peripheral vision. He can't see him. And then all of a sudden, you've got a Terminator, just a percolator is what he likes to be called, just tearing you down. I mean, that hit he had on Robbie Ashford for the sack. I mean, that was insane. So, takeaways, Tyler, from the offense or the defense. What do you got?
I'm going to start with the defense. The defensive line. This was definitely their best game. You saw really all of them involved. Makai Wingo. There was just a lot of pressure from Peyton Thorne and Robbie Ashford. They really dominated Auburn's offensive line. Auburn's offensive line really struggled. Like you mentioned, the atmosphere definitely helped that. A lot of false starts, and then there were a lot of penalties on them. I got to give credit to Jordan Jefferson. He has really been a menace in the middle, the transfer from West Virginia. And then also the secondary. I really didn't see too many big plays. They had Auburn had that two touchdowns from that tight end play, but that was only from like the goal line. But all in all, I mean, this was definitely the best defensive performance. Now, is it more of Auburn's offense isn't very good, or is it LSU taking a step in the right direction? I'm going to go on the lines of stepping in the right direction since we're an LSU
I
show
like it.
because we,
I like
we
it.
like to think
Optimism.
positive. But I mean, I can't really have anything on the offense. I mean, it's just like
It is what
2019-ish
it is.
level offense. I mean, this is a team that's put up over 500 yards total offense in three straight games, and no other LSU team has done it. With all the talent that 2019 team did, they didn't do it. This team is just like they have found their formula. I got to tip my cap to Mike Denbrock. He has been a fantastic offense coordinator. He's been calling up and dialing up the plays, and it's easy, especially with the playmakers that you got in the slot. And then Aaron Anderson also was able to get a couple of key catches too. And then we also saw Gregory Clayton get a good punt return.
Yep.
So everything was just working on Saturday night. So definitely a step in the right direction for this team moving forward.
Yeah, special teams look good. I think Ramos had 3 field goals. He went 3 for 3. Like you said, I believe Clayton muffed the first punt, but picked it up real quick, and
Yeah.
then he had that nice return on the kickoff. Caleb Jackson broke a 60-yarder that was called back a little bit because of a penalty, but I mean he's just running over people left and right. Um, Kind of a bold take here, right? 2019 offense full of stars, but I think their offense clicked because of Joe Burrow. With this team, Jane Daniel definitely runs this offense to a high level of efficiency, but I think it's so good because of the playmakers he has around him. He can throw it down to Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas, even Kyron Lacey. You have Aaron Anderson and Chris Hilton, who Chris Hilton's still hurt, but those two are such a threat from a speed standpoint that the defense has to account for him, leaving another guy open. Then you have Logan Diggs, Noah Kane, who hasn't played a ton, Josh Emery, and Josh Williams. I mean, there's 4 more running backs I'm forgetting about. You got Caleb Jackson. You got so many guys that at every position that there's never going to be a lack of talent. It was just a matter of putting it all together, and it seems like Mike Denbrock is finally calling a scheme that plays to his players' strengths, and we're seeing the results from it. LSU has scored at least the third consecutive game in which they've scored at least 48 points. The only other team to do that, like you mentioned, was in 2019. And then also Jane Daniels, he accounted for 418 total yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 1 on the ground, and that makes him the first SEC player with 3 passing and 1 rushing touchdown, or and 50 rushing yards. Sorry, reading the stats here in 3 consecutive games since Johnny Manziel in 2012. And you know who won the Heisman in 2012? That would be Mr. Johnny Manziel. So you got to give Jane Daniels his respect. I was listening to the Colada show this morning. Callers were calling in and apologizing for saying they wanted Nussmeier to beat the starter at the beginning of the season. They're giving Daniels his flowers. They're very well deserved. And it just looks great. I'd like to see Caleb Jackson get a few more touches in there at the running back position because I love to see him just bury people. And the Auburn linebacker, I mean, that's the captain of their team, their leading tackler. It's not some freshman slouch that he ran over. I mean, this is a grown man that he put into the dirt. So it's looking really good from an offensive standpoint. Defense is coming along, and we just got to keep it moving. And I think playing Auburn, or I'm sorry, playing Army is definitely the time to build on this momentum. So, Tyler, let's get to our Tiger on the prowl. So Tiger on the prowl, best Tiger that we saw kind of stand out. It's hard to not pick the big name guys like a Jaden Daniels or a Harold Perkins, but Tyler, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a guy that had an underrated game, and that was Kyron Lacey. It feels like we're just on a rotating. 2 weeks ago, Brian Thomas he had himself a game, and then last week it was Malik Neighbors. This week, Kyron Lacey 4 receptions, 111 yards, and a touchdown. To have that few many receptions and have that many yards is impressive. A lot of yards after the catch, and you saw a lot of that. On the first touchdown, Malik Neighbors. It was only like a 5 yard throw, and Malik Neighbors took it
Hmm.
to the house. So these wide receivers do a great job of catching the football and then running for days. So Kyron Lacey, he is very underrated. No one really talks about him. All the talk is about Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, as it should. But Kyron Lacey having himself a game against a very solid Auburn defense that looked very lost on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people remember, know Lacey as he's 50-50. He's going to catch the ball. He's had some pretty big drops. He had a big one in the Florida State game, a couple in the Texas A&M game last year. But I think with him, it's just about getting that confidence back. These balls hit you in the hands, you drop it, and it really starts to weigh on you. So for him to have a kind of a breakout game like this, it's great for the young man's confidence moving forward. So my Tiger on the Prowl award, I'm going on the defensive side of things. We haven't done a lot of defensive this year. I think last week you had Harold Perkins. I'm going to give mine to Zy Alexander. We've been very critical of him in the pass defense and the DB side of things, but he had a big game in the pass defensive side with 2 pass breakups and a team best of 9 tackles. And he was just in the right spot at the right time. He was turning his head around finally, breaking up passes. Now, like you mentioned, Auburn not the best offense, but it builds confidence going forward. So it was good to see the DBs actually, play how we expect LSU DBs to play. So and shut down that passing attack. So let's get to Army. Not a whole lot to preview, but we'll tell you what we know. So, coming into Tiger Stadium next Saturday with a 6:30 p.m. kickoff, you have the Army Black Knights touting a record of 2-4. Previously, you'd known this team to run the triple option, but they have decided to kind of get with the times now and run the spread offense. They're not running it very great, but they're running it nonetheless. Quarterback Bryson Daly of Army, he's the lead passer and the lead rusher, which is a little surprising. He's coming off three straight losses, which I believe they just got blown out by Troy. Is that right, Tyler? It was a shutout by
Yeah,
Troy.
19-0.
He only has 77 pass attempts on the year, and the leading receiver has 9 catches on the year. So that's kind of eye opening, right? If you're trying to run the spread offense. So this is a game. LSU is a 30.5 point favorite, or 30 point favorite, excuse me. This is a game that it's like, I mean, what are you gonna do, right? It's you schedule these games. It's good. You don't want to look ahead to Alabama. Luckily, we have the bye week after this. But I expect to see a lot of freshmen play. Maybe you have the starters in for the first half, halfway into the third quarter. It's definitely something for the defense to improve on. Make sure they hit their assignments. The technique is good. So, Tyler, you probably haven't spent a lot of time watching Army, but what's a quick score prediction you got here for the Tigers this coming Saturday?
Yeah, I'm very baffled that Army is struggling this much. They're coming off of a 6-6 season. If you look at all the Naval Academy, Navy is struggling. Army, the best one is Air Force right now. Good thing this wasn't Air
Yeah,
Force because this would definitely be a very tricky
big.
game. But yeah, like you mentioned, Army is the losers of their last three. Two of them being two ACC schools, Boston College and Syracuse. If you watch Syracuse lately, they're not very good, and Boston College is one of the worst teams in the ACC. And then they got shut out by Troy. I think that Troy, they won the Sun Belt last year. But so yeah, this is a team that just is tough to figure out. They got a good win against UTSA early in the season. You thought that at that point, they're sitting at 2-1. From there, you look at their schedule; it's not too bad. They had the LSU game coming up, and now here it is. But I think that this is more. This is definitely going to be a treat. I'm sure that there's going to be some sort of flyover. Maybe a parachuter is
It'll
going
be
to.
a cool
It's
environment.
definitely going to be a cool environment, especially for those of Army. The cadets will probably be traveling. You'll probably see the band play on the field. So it's definitely going to be a fun trip for them coming into a place like this in Death Valley. Brian Kelly, as a coach, he's played Army before whenever he was at Notre Dame. So he has some experience coaching then. But like you mentioned, they don't run the triple option anymore. But like you mentioned, also, they're still going to run the football. So LSU's defensive line is definitely going to be tested. If you asked me a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have been worried about our defensive line, but the way
Yeah, really.
that they would that the way that they've been improving, I don't think that this is going to be much a game. I think that you'll probably see the starters on offense. They'll probably score like 30 or 40 points and be like, all right, enjoy the rest of the fourth quarter and then the bye week and get ready for probably the game that's going to decide the SEC West, depending on how Ole Miss finishes out the season. So I think that this is pretty much your final tune-up before that big game. So give me LSU, and I think that they cover this one. I think that LSU gets the 30 points. So give me the 49-10 victory over Army.
I like it. I like it. I'm going on a similar route. I definitely think they cover 30 points. Give me a 56-10. I think they get one more touchdown than you accounted for,
All
Tyler.
right.
I think they get
Old
56.
Nussbus comes in and gets the 50.
Well, and Nussmeier, he doesn't want to just come in and hand the ball off, right? He's gonna have this offense clicking. This is a potential for the guys that don't get a lot of playing time to really show out. Forgot to mention in our Auburn takeaways that we did lose Emory Jones. So
Yeah.
obviously you're not going to see him. It's Brian Kelly said it's a high ankle sprain, but so Lance Hurd, I mean, he's a 5-star. He's a big dude. He was fighting for a starting spot, right? Uh, he played very well against Auburn. So I think you put him in, he just gets more reps versus Army. Going into the bye week, I think Emory Jones will probably be back for Alabama. But if not, this is a very good opportunity for Hurt. Army's defensive line isn't going to be able to hold water to Alabama, right? But It's game experience. It's good playing time. So I do want to see the defense of starters stay out there a little longer than the offense does. I think they need the experience, get them going, try to hold these Army Black Knights to a low score. If it was a triple option still, I would be worried because that's just a completely different offensive play scheme that you got to prepare for than just a regular spread offense. So Tigers win big. I think we both agree there, and let's hope we're right come next week. So let's get to some around town news. All right, so around town news, Tyler, take us away.
All right, so the celebration for the Lady Tigers women's basketball team will continue as Lil Wayne will be performing
Yes.
in the PMAC on November 15th. So get your tickets. They're going to be going on sale tomorrow, Tuesday, if this show is already out by then, 10 a.m. So if you're wanting to watch, Lil Wayne and also celebrate the Lady Tigers before they tip off in early November, definitely going to be a fun environment in the PMAC.
Yeah, Lil Wayne came to the PMAC for what they call it when we were students there.
Uh,
It had some like I don't think they called it Fall Fest, but
it was like
it was
it was in the
something.
spring. I don't know. I
Yes,
forgot what it's called.
but it was a fun concert, fun time. So make sure if you haven't seen him yet, go enjoy it. He loves LSU. He loves him some Kim Bulkey. So maybe we'll see who's Flage. That's
Flage.
the
Yeah, we might
yeah.
see a
Maybe we'll see
collab.
her. Yeah, I think they did a song together in the off season. So maybe we'll see her out on the stage. So we appreciate everybody watching. Let us know your comments on the score prediction going forward for the Army game. What you thought of the Auburn game, what you thought of the defense, and the corrections they made. And with that, we'll see you next week. Go Tigers.